Hey everyone, how you doing? Welcome to the channel. I don't often tend to do dedicated video reviews for subsequent books in a series. I usually save those just for the opening book, but I've got one for you today. This is for The Shadowgate, Book 2 of Dragon Spirits by MacRae. So if you've seen my video review for it, you'll know that I really loved The Iron Crown, book 1 in this series, and also the prequel novella, which was the Citrine Key. I just thought that the overall concept was quite fresh and exciting for someone who really likes epic fantasy and who loves dragons, but who finds them, well, a little bit boring sometimes, if I'm honest. With this series, I think MacRae has, with quite a simple little move, made dragons exciting again. As soon as I picked up the Shadowgate and started reading, I just felt at home. It's a really special thing when you find a book or an author or a series that just seems to get you, and I've been blessed to find many of these series, and the Dragon Spirits by MacRae is definitely in that number. There's so much to love about the Shadowgate, but one thing that I'm not going to talk about really is the plot. Because I do non-spoiler reviews, it would be difficult to go into the story itself in any level of detail without giving things away. I will talk a bit about some of the characters, and I understand how that can be spoilerish in its own way as you get deeper into a series, but I don't think there's really any way around that, and also you will find these names mentioned on the back of book synopses as well. Instead, I'll start this review with one of the joys of the series for me, which is the dragons. Here in book 2, I think the dragon spirits really start to come into their own, and they have some really epic scenes. I mean, what could be more epic than two giant dragons duking it out in the skies above you? If there was ever any doubt as to why this series was called the Dragon Spirits, those doubts are definitely answered here. We see so much more of the dragons here, and they really are epic. Even the smaller dragons, relatively speaking, have big presence, and I really like the way that was accomplished. Here though, we really start to see the true might of these dragon spirits, including the great archons. And when you come across a chapter title like the Archon of Lightning, you know you're in for a treat. I think it was in one of my recent indie author showcase videos that MacRae said there were 9 dragon spirits featured in this book, and for me I thought they all had their own presence, their own personality to set them apart, so it's not just a case of just another dragon whenever one of them pops up. They're all characters in their own right, and I think that can be quite a difficult thing to manage, but it was done very well here. For the more traditional characters, there were a lot of high points here. I really enjoyed the journey that each of the characters went on, sometimes on their own, sometimes with others around them for support. And I think the actual character development is quite subtle here as you're reading and enjoying the book, but to look at where our characters will be at the start of book 3, compared to where we first met them in book 1, or even when they were reintroduced at the start of book 2, there's going to be a marked difference for many of them. When writing some notes for this, I started by thinking that Finn and Giselle as individuals are going to have such a different dynamic in book 3, but then I thought, well, the same could be said for Torsten, and for Kalindra, and for Apollo, and I realised that you could say the same for pretty much all of the main characters that we have here. For an author to do that, to have such a marked difference, a marked change in their characters, but to have it happen organically through the storytelling rather than from the result of just one big obvious trigger, is no mean feat. Often I find when there's a big change in a character, it can backfire, it can make a character less likeable or less relatable, and I didn't have a problem with that whatsoever here. I was excited to see the changes and to think about how they're going to impact the continuing story. Now onto the world building, and I'd really like how we got a good mix here of new locations and locations that are expanded on, including some areas that will be new to those who haven't read the novella, The Citrine Key. So as a side note here, the Citrine Key is set 5 years before the events of the Iron Crown and the Shadowgate, which continues directly from the end of book 1 in the series, and while you can read the novella after the Iron Crown, I would definitely recommend reading it before the Shadowgate, because there are various things that are referred back to, a lot more than you'll find in the Iron Crown at least. I don't think there's enough there to leave you scratching your head and wondering what on earth is going on if you decide to skip the novella, but you'll definitely have a better reading experience in my opinion, as it'll fill in the gaps as you're reading. As it is, for me as someone who's read the Citrine Key, I like how we revisit the main setting of the novella, and in doing so we see so much more. It's not just endless ice and snow, and going there at this point of the story really helps with some of the character development we see as well. Like any good epic fantasy though, the expansion of the world is gradually increased as the story progresses, showing us just how big it really is. I think it's well handled, and I like how it follows nicely the line of what I would call just right, meaning that there's plenty that's potentially left to be unveiled to us in book 3 of the series. And as far as that third book goes, with the growth that we have here of the world and of the characters, and the way the storyline just continues to build and build, I'm really excited to see what we're going to find there. So for me, this next part was really easy. I gave The Shadow Gate 5 stars. It's definitely one of my favourite recent books, and I'm confident that it's going to be right up there in the conversation at the end of the year when I start to think about my favourite books of 2023. So on to my weighted ratings, and this was a little bit surprising for me actually, because I rate my books individually. I don't look at any scores that I've given any previous books when I come to do them. I just do them by gut feeling for each of the individual categories. But then when there's reason to, like this where it's book 2 in a series, I do then go back and compare to the previous book to see how it does against its predecessor. And actually for this one, I scored exactly the same in every single category. So we start off with enjoyment, and like the Iron Crown, I gave 19 out of 20 because I had such a good time with it. I loved the overall story, the characters, the character development, as I say, was really good here. But I just love the way that the dragon spirits especially were really expanded upon here. That really helped, of course, in the world building, which scored 18 out of 20. As I said, I love the expansion of the world where we see more of a geography, but those dragon spirits were such a big part of it. They really impacted my enjoyment of it, and of course they helped this book to a really good world building score. For the characters, I also gave 18 out of 20. Yes, I've said that I love the character growth that we have here, but I like the individual characters that we have anyway, so to see them being developed, to see them growing, is really a good bonus for me. For the plot, I gave 17 out of 20. This is always one of my hardest areas to score because it is so difficult to have a perfect or close to perfect plot. All of the other elements can be really good, but the plot is just, I don't know, it's a little bit different. I suppose if you go down one path, it closes off other paths to you, and often we'll see those pathways visited in follow-up books, so the overall plot for a series can be absolutely perfect for me, but for individual books, there's just not enough room to go down all of them. I did like the plot, I loved the storyline that we had here, and as I said, I'm really excited to see where it's going to take us in book 3. The writing style here was really good for me. It scored 9 out of 10. I just had such a good time with it. The pages flowed really nicely. I had no issues with the writing at all. And it's just, as I said at the start of the video, this book, this series, this author just seems to get me. It just works really well for me. And that's definitely helped with a good fluid writing style. The pacing I gave 4 out of 5. I thought it was really nicely paced. I do like a quick overall pace, and that's definitely what I got here. I did end up reading more than half a book. I think it was about 60% in one day. It's about 550 pages overall, so a good few hundred pages in not one sitting but in one day, because of all of the things that I've spoken about with enjoying the story and having a good writing style. But the pacing really helped because it just kept going at a really good pace for me, so I didn't want to put it down. And then for my discretionary category, I've given a 3 out of 5. I'm really enjoying this series. I do like the covers. They look great together. Normally I do prefer to see a bit more on my covers, but these ones I just think work really well. I love some of the additional extras that you get as well, especially if you know me, I like a good map, and we do get a map or two with each of these books as well. So for anyone keeping track, that puts this one at 88%, which as I said is exactly the same in every category, so the end score as well is exactly the same as the Iron Crown, which I don't think I've seen before for a series, so I was very surprised and maybe a bit amused when that came up for me. But it puts in at equal 14th. It's just these two books that have scored 88% actually, so it's in some really good company with some fantastic indie sequels around it, as well as some other great titles, because we are of course very close to the top of my Hall of Fame. So those are my quick thoughts on The Shadowgate, Book 2 of Dragon Spirits by MacRae. I really had a good time with this. Definitely recommend getting out and picking it up when it comes out on the 26th of April if you've read The Iron Crown. If you haven't read The Iron Crown, get out there and do it. If you like epic fantasy, if you like dragons, if you like great character work, this is definitely a series that could work well for you. Drop me a comment down below if you're a fan of this series, what are you looking forward to in this book, or if you've read The Shadowgate already, what were your thoughts on it? I'll hopefully catch you in another video sometime soon, but until then, as always, take care of yourself, read some good books. Bye for now.